Hello. Do you have an interest in an international career? Have you ever wondered what it's like to work with the United Nations or a non-governmental organization in places like Africa or Asia? Do you have an interest in working in human rights, refugee issues, development, or any field that is covered by the United Nations or an NGO? Do you want to know what you can do while you're here at Carleton to start your international career? Well, if you do, this presentation may be for you. My name is James Milner, and I'm based here in the Department of Political Science at Carleton University. But for many, many years before coming to Carleton, I worked with the United Nations and NGOs on issues relating to refugees. Specifically, I worked with the UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, in places like India, in Cameroon, in Guinea, and in their headquarters in Geneva. And for many years, I've been involved with different NGOs and different UN agencies and the work that they do both at a global level and in the field. This presentation is part of an international careers workshop that I give at Carleton from time to time. It's designed for second-year students in political science, in the Arthur Kruger College, in law, in any field that relates to international global issues, human rights, or development. And it's designed for students who want to know how they can start their international career and take advantage of the opportunities that are available to you while you're an undergraduate student here at Carleton. The reason why we're taping the presentation portion of the workshop is we find that many students with their class and work schedules, many students who have already started the work of their international careers, find it difficult to come to attend the workshop. And so we've posted this lecture online. You will also find a PDF of the presentation notes of the slides next to the web link to this presentation. So please do take a moment to print out the slides because there's lots of information about web links and other information that will pass up on the screen fairly quickly. In this presentation, I draw from my own experience, from some of the advice that I was given along the way, from when I started as an undergraduate student right to working with the UN's Refugee Agency in their headquarters in Geneva. My hope with this presentation is to give you practical advice that will help you get started and make the most of the opportunities that you have available to you right now. There are a few things that I want to cover in this presentation. I'm going to start by telling you what an international career is all about. And I'm going to start with my own experience working in the field to say what it's like to actually go out and do this international work. And then if I don't scare you off with that description, what I'll do is then turn to some outlines of where the international careers are posted. What are the international careers? What are the opening positions, the entry-level positions for an international career? How do you get a sense of what's going to be expected of you five or more years down the line? But I want to spend quite a bit of time talking about your toolkit. I want you to get a sense of the kinds of skills and experiences that you can develop while you're here at Carleton that go beyond your degree and the work that you do in the classroom. How you can equip yourself with particular skills and experiences while you're a student here at Carleton that will help launch your international career once you graduate. I'm going to make a pitch as to why it's important to start early, why it's best to get started in at least your second year as an undergraduate, and then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how you can be entrepreneurial, how you can advance your international career, how you can make your own luck. Again, please remember to print out the PDF of the slides of this presentation so that you get all of the information that I'm going to be delivering to you. So let's get started. What's it like to work in the field? Here are some photos of me working with the UN's Refugee Agency in Guinea, in West Africa. I was there in 2001 as part of a group that was deployed to help with the refugee situation in Guinea. At the time, Guinea, a relatively small country, hosted more than 500,000 refugees from Sierra Leone and Liberia. And the United Nations, UNHCR, was there to run refugee camps to help ensure that refugees found protection in Guinea, and they found a durable solution. So part of my job was to identify those refugees that were especially vulnerable in Guinea and needed to be relocated or resettled to another country like Canada. So some of the work that I did was in the refugee camp, and in the top the top left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a photo of me with a refugee wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey in the refugee camp. This is as we were relocating refugees from a camp that was too close to the border and moving them to another refugee camp. In the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you can see me with representatives of the Guinean Security Force. They were there to keep me safe because we were right on the border with Liberia and with Sierra Leone. There were often times that it was very dangerous on the border. So international work can be very exciting. You're right there in the thick of the action. You make a direct contribution to the life of refugees or other vulnerable populations. But there are some aspects of international work that involve a certain amount of insecurity or danger. But a point that I would want to make is that not all international work is through a UN agency or through an NGO. There are lots of ways of engaging with international issues. The photo that you see now is of me in the Grand Marché, the central market of Nzerekore, a town in the south of Guinea near the border with Liberia. And I'm there with colleagues from the government of Guinea and the representatives of the market, the people who are responsible for running this very large market where people from across West Africa came to trade their goods. Now, why do I show you this photo? I'm showing you this photo because it's not when I was working with the United Nations. In fact, I went back to Guinea as a researcher. My job there was not to deliver a program, but my job was to do research on the nature of the situation there, how the prolonged presence of refugees had an impact on Guinea, and to try and make recommendations on how the UN, NGOs, and governments like Guinea, like Canada, could do a better job in providing for refugees. So I make this point because I think of my international career as having spanned many years, but also many different roles. Sometimes I was in the field working with a UN agency, delivering a program. Other times I was in the field working as a researcher. So something I want you to think about is the many different ways that you can be involved with the kinds of issues that are important to you. If you care about human rights, if you care about development, if you care about the environment, there are lots of different ways on working with these issues that we call international. And sometimes they involve going to the field, working on a program. Sometimes it involves going to the field, doing research. But sometimes it involves being in places like Ottawa, like New York, like Geneva, like London, in a capital city where you're doing advocacy work to try and encourage change in the programs that we currently see. But when I reflect on the kind of work that I did for UNHCR, the kind of work that I did with the UN's Refugee Agency, the work that I did in the field and the work that I did in headquarters in Geneva weren't all that different. My main responsibility in the field was work to protect refugees. It meant a lot of time meeting with refugees, interviewing refugees, documenting their story, and preparing a file of the case of that refugee to then submit that case to a country like Canada to ask them possibly to resettle this refugee, to provide them with protection, and to help them find a durable solution. But I also did a lot of work on planning future projects, developing recommendations on how the programs could be better run to help more refugees. And again, that involved a lot of time meeting with people and writing reports, making recommendations. I did quite a bit of work with capacity building, training people who were there in Guinea so that more people were able to do this kind of work. And I did quite a bit of work of logistics, systems development, so being involved with plans for relocating groups of hundreds of refugees from a border area to a refugee camp where they would be safe. In headquarters, I also did a lot of writing and presenting. So I would write policy. UNHCR has a handbook on how refugees should be treated when they're being considered for resettlement. Part of my job was to revise that handbook, add new chapters to that handbook, and then to meet with states and with NGOs to convince them that the changes that I was proposing were good changes and that they should accept them. So it was a lot of, again, presenting the work that I had written and convincing people of my position. I also spent time writing speeches and response documents, so documents that would respond to questions from organizations outside of the UN, and again, a lot of planning and programming. So when you think of this list that's up on the screen right now of what I did in the field and what I did in headquarters, how different is that from the coursework that you do here at Carleton? How often do you have to write an essay? How often do you have to write an exam? How often do you have to stand up and give a presentation to your peers in a short period of time to deliver information and convince them of your point of view? The point that I make here is that the skills that you need to be successful with a UN agency in doing human rights work is not that different from the kind of skills that you're already developing here at Carleton. I want you to think about how you can take the work that you're currently doing and make sure that you're honing those skills that you'll need once you start your international career. Before I get into the actual specifics of where these jobs are and how you go about developing all of these skills that you need to do your career, I want to dispel some myths and talk about some of the realities of what it's like in the field. There's a myth that going off to work with a UN agency or with an NGO, it will pay you really well and it will let you escape. It's currently mid-December in Ottawa, and it's getting cold and there's forecasts of snow, and there are certain times where you look outside of your window and you think how wonderful it would be to be off in Asia, to be off in Africa, doing work that's meaningful and that might pay me really, really well to help cancel out all of those debts, all of my student loans. Well, I want to tell you that a lot of that image, a lot of that myth is true. I've been at Carleton for 3.5 years now, and the time that I've been here teaching students, doing research has been wonderfully rewarding and very exciting. But there's something very special and very unique about the satisfaction that you get from work in the field. When I was working as a UNHCR resettlement consultant, when I was working with refugees and trying to understand their problems and advocate for a solution, if I did my job really, really well, if I worked really hard, I had a direct impact in changing the life of a person. If I did my job really well, at the end of the month or at the end of the year, I would be able to go to the airport and go with refugees who were leaving the country where they found asylum, leaving the country where they were unsafe, getting on an airplane to start a new life in a new country. If I did my job really well, I could help refugees who'd been wrongfully imprisoned. I could help refugees who were the victims of violence within the refugee camp. I had that feeling as though I was making a direct contribution. And that's a wonderful feeling. There's also a sense of adventure. You remember the photos that I showed you before of being in the refugee camp, traveling along the border with an escort right there in the thick of the action. It was no longer studying these things, but it was actually out and doing it. And that's a very, very exciting feeling. But all of this satisfaction and this sense of adventure, it's important to balance all of this with a healthy dose of reality of some of the downsides, of some of the challenges associated with working in the field. One of the greatest challenges that I found was the challenge of mobility. There was a period of about 6 or 7 years in my life where I was never in one place for more than 6 or 7 months. Many people who work within the United Nations, they complain about what they call the rotational policy. It means that you never spend more than a couple of years in one place and you're always just arriving or you're just leaving. You spend a lot of time moving around. Now at first this is very exciting. You get to see new places and you get to discover new people and make new friends. But over time it can start to place a strain on personal relationships. The divorce rate in UNHCR is up over 70%. That means more than 2/3 of marriages within the UN's refugee agency end in divorce. Some people find it very difficult to maintain personal relationships through this kind of work. And I want you to be aware of that. I also want you to be very aware of the security implications of doing work, especially in conflict zones. There's been a very disturbing trend in the past 10 years of the increase of attacks on humanitarian workers, on UN workers. Just last month in the news, there was a story of 3 volunteers with the organization Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, who were working in the Dadaab refugee camps in Kenya. 2 of these workers were kidnapped, and 1 of these workers was shot. If you're interested in this kind of career, pay very close attention to the news. Visit the website of the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, a website I'll post in a few moments, and look at the realities, the strains, and the dangers faced by workers in humanitarian organizations. And the last point relates to flying cockroaches. And let me tell you a very quick story. Traveling overseas, being in places like right on the border between Guinea and Liberia, between Guinea and Sierra Leone, it comes with a lot of excitement and new experiences. One of the experiences that I found was that cockroaches could fly. I don't know if you knew that. Let me tell you very briefly this story. This was in June 2001, and I was working with the UN, UNHCR, in Guinea, and I had gone to Geneva for a meeting, and while I was there, I decided I'd get a few creature comforts and bring them back to the field where I was living and working. So I bought myself a little bottle of Head & Shoulders shampoo. It's amazing what counts as a creature comfort when you're working in the field. So I brought this bottle of shampoo back with me, and I went back to the guest house where I was staying in a town called Kisidugu. And I decided that the first morning that I was there, when I woke up, I would have a hot shower, and I'd have a good wash and scrub myself down, get my hair nice and clean with Head & Shoulders. It sounds like a small thing, but it was a big luxury. Now, the bathroom that I had in this guest house, it wasn't a bathroom like we'd normally think of, where there's a separate shower stall and a toilet and what have you. It was one big room where in one corner there was a sink and a toilet, and on the other side of the room there was a little spigot that came out of the wall, which was the shower head. Not a shower head with a spray, but just a little spigot. So there was a trickle of water that would come out. And the whole floor of this bathroom was sloped down towards the corner where that drain was. And so when you would shower, the water would splash about, but it would drain down into that drain. Now, the keeper of the guest house, it was a very basic place, but the keeper of the guest house, when I arrived, he said, "Tomorrow morning, I promise you that there will be hot water. It's the only morning that I can guarantee that you'll have hot water when you wake up." This was exciting. And so that morning, I got up and I thought, I'm going to have a great shower. I'm going to go to work ready and clean. And I walk into the bathroom, and what do I see? The floor is covered in cockroaches. And when I say cockroaches, I don't mean the little ones that sort of run around your apartment on Homewood. I mean big cockroaches, the really big ones with big legs, and you could almost see them staring you in the eye. But I was not going to be put off. So what I did is I got a bucket of water, and I went into the bathroom, and very carefully I used the water to sloosh across the floor and to push the cockroaches to a far corner of the bathroom. And I thought, that's it, I'm home free. The cockroaches are over there, the shower is over here. I turned it on, there was hot water, I got all soaked up and it was great. The Head & Shoulder was in my hair and I was feeling great. But you know that moment when you're showering and you put the shampoo in your hair, and no matter how hard you try, you can't keep your eyes open. It was just at that moment when I was cleaning my hair, my eyes were closed, that all of a sudden I heard it. And bam, all of a sudden in my hair were 6 or 7 cockroaches. So I tell you that story not to put you off buying Head & Shoulders or staying at the Nelson Mandela guest house in Kisidugu, but just to say that there are some of these aspects of working overseas that at first sound incredibly exciting. And you have great stories to tell when you come back. But be very honest with yourself over time. Would these kinds of adventures, would these kinds of experiences wear you down? If you want to know more about what it's really like in the field, I have 2 books that you can read. And they're not long, detailed academic books. They're 2 really good and readable novels. The first is by Philip Caputo. It's called Acts of Faith. Now, Philip Caputo is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and he wrote this novel about humanitarian workers in a place called Lokichokyo. It's up in the northwest of Kenya, and it's the base for humanitarian operations into South Sudan. And he describes lots of different kinds of characters who are involved in humanitarian work. The cowboy, the wild, adventure-seeking humanitarian worker, the deeply principled NGO, and the business person. Reading Acts of Faith, you can almost taste the dust in Lokichokyo. It's a wonderfully vivid description of what life is like actually doing humanitarian work, and also what some of the costs are associated with this pursuit. The second is by Helen Fielding. Does the name sound familiar? It's the same person who wrote Bridget Jones's Diary. And before she created Bridget Jones, she wrote a book called Cause Célèbre. And it's the story of humanitarian workers in a fictional country, but I think it's Ethiopia in the 1980s. Again, a very vivid description of the trials, tribulations, and victories of doing humanitarian work. So if I haven't completely put you off the idea of humanitarian work, let me show you a few photos. This was the view from my balcony every night when I lived in Conakry in Guinea. The sun setting over the Atlantic Ocean. So while there were flying cockroaches, yes, there were challenges of security, there were some very beautiful and stunning moments. There are some amazing parts of the world to see. But there were also challenges of security, as I'll keep mentioning to you. This is a photo of the UNHCR office in Gekedu. It was a large town where the UN had a large office working with tens of thousands of refugees. But when the civil war spilled over from Liberia and Sierra Leone into Guinea, the UN office was attacked. And this is what was left behind. Whatever the rebels were unable to steal and take with them, they destroyed. During this attack, actually on the town of Macenta, so another town at the same time, the head of office for UNHCR was killed, and one of the administrators, one of the radio operators, was abducted by the rebels. So insecurity is a real concern. So are everyday frustrations. This is a photo of what we encountered when we were trying to drive from Macenta back to Kisidugu one day. There was a pothole that was so big that it swallowed a school bus. And all of these other trucks were trying to get around this traffic jam by cutting their way into the forest to try and create a new road. And we were stuck there for many, many hours before we were able to get past. Wonderfully exciting for the first half hour. So, with all that said, what are some of the tips or challenges to be aware of if you're going to work overseas? Here's just a few that I've been thinking about over the years. The first is to understand the Canadian work culture, and that this work culture is not necessarily shared in all parts of the world. What is the Canadian work culture? When you go to a meeting, you expect it to start roughly on time. You expect there to be some kind of an agenda, and if people have been asked to prepare work for that meeting, you expect that it will happen. Canadians have been accused of being very cold, very impersonal, very businesslike, and not understanding the interpersonal or the social aspects of working in some other parts of the world. This is not to say that the Canadian work culture is right or wrong. It's just to say that some Canadians find it frustrating going to work overseas because many different people in other parts of the world do business in a slightly different way. And it's important to be aware of our own assumptions and our need to understand that we're working in someone else's work environment, and how are we able to adapt. Culture shock and culture fatigue are two things that you may have heard about before. Culture shock is to arrive in somewhere that's very, very different. What always strikes me is how the smell of a place can be different, or the sounds. You prepare yourself for things to look different, but are there other things that take you by surprise? The shock may wear off. You may get over that initial hump, the challenges of working in a new place, being far away from friends and family, not having internet that always works, not always being able to communicate as often as you would like. But over time, we may experience culture fatigue. And there are ways of getting over fatigue, that grind, that frustration, those difficulties that come of working in a different work environment. You can find ways of participating in something that's more familiar, like a sport. You can find a host national family, someone from that place with whom you really get along, and you can talk through the questions or the frustrations or the difficulties you're experiencing. You can take a break. You can take a long weekend in a different place. You can take the familiar with you. Make sure that your favorite music is loaded onto your MP3 player. Make sure that you're taking some DVDs or that you've loaded some TV episodes or some favorite movies onto your laptop before you go. And maintain contact back home. Also, be aware of the fact that the experience of living and working overseas may be different for men, women, married people, single people, people who are gay, people who are straight. So what I'm presenting to you is based on my own experience. If you want to know more about the experience that may be waiting for you, there are chat groups, there are blogs, there are discussion groups. Go online, find information, and talk to people who are more like you, who have done work like this. Ask them what it is that you might expect. Be very aware of security concerns. You'll notice that's something I keep coming back to. I want you to be very aware of the fact that working overseas is not always safe. Now, that's not to say that working in Ottawa is without its risks or challenges of security. But when you travel abroad, especially into conflict areas, especially into large urban areas, you may find that there are concerns about home invasions, street crime, or political violence. Be sure to always check the website of Canada's Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. Canada's Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade posts travel advisories. So be sure to Google your country, see if there's a travel advisory, what can you expect, and make sure that when you arrive, or preferably before you go, you have a conversation with the organization that will be hosting you, and you ask about security concerns. And the last general point that I will make is to not underestimate how hard it is to come home. Often the greatest challenges that I've faced in working overseas is not when I am overseas, but when I come home. I have had a very different kind of experience in interacting with my friends and my family who've not shared that experience directly. It may come with special challenges, so be aware of that. So, if I have now, again, not completely put you off the idea of an international career, where do you start? On the screen, I've posted some links for entry-level positions with the Government of Canada. But I want to problematize for you that there are two very different kinds of ways of getting involved and starting an international career. There are formal programs and there are informal programs. Now, we're very fortunate that the Government of Canada has very clear and very transparent entry-level programs with the Department of National Defence, the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, and Canada's International Development Agency. Again, remember that the PDF of these slides is posted on the website of the Department of Political Science next to the link for this video, so don't worry about copying down all these web addresses right now. You can also go into the Public Service Commission and see a whole series of other entry-level opportunities or competitions that are run by the Government of Canada for entry-level positions. Now, there are many benefits with these formal entry-level positions. Probably the most important pro is that they're very transparent. You can go online, you can specifically see what the requirements are for these positions, and if you want to apply for the Foreign Service Recruitment Program, let's say 5 years from now, go on the website today and look at the qualifications. What kind of degrees do you need? How many languages do you need to speak? What kind of experience do you need? The transparency of these programs mean that you can use them as a planning tool. You can go online right now and see what will be required of you when you eventually apply. And that way you can use it as a guide of what should you be doing in the next 5 years, in the next 4 years, to prepare yourself to be competitive for this kind of a competition. Some people have said that the downside, the cons, the drawbacks of these formal programs, they can take a lot of time. Recruitment into the federal public service can take upwards of a year, 18 months, 2 years. There can be many standardized tests that you have to write along the way, your recruitment test, your language test, your written English test, or your written French test. There's also the question that when you come in through a formal recruitment program, you enter into a government bureaucracy, often at a very junior level. Some people find it frustrating that within a bureaucracy, the chances for promotion are very structured and standardized. Now again, we're very fortunate in Canada to have these transparent and clear entry-level positions. I encourage you to look at them and consider if they may be right for you. But I also want you to be aware of these many informal opportunities to start your international career. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations that work on international issues that recruit people just like you. Now, some of these may be non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Have you ever heard of Oxfam, MSF, Care Canada? These are organizations that recruit people to work in Canada on international issues, but also to go and work overseas. Now, some of these NGOs are huge international organizations like Oxfam that has offices here in Canada and in dozens and dozens of other countries. Some of these NGOs may be very small. It may be an NGO of just 5 or 6 people that work on a very specific issue. Many of these organizations have websites that describe who they're looking for and what kind of entry-level positions they have. I'll show you some websites at the end of this presentation, but be aware of those. There are also opportunities with international organizations, the United Nations, regional organizations like the African Union, the European Union, the Organization of American States. All of these international organizations have different recruitment programs, some that are more formalized, some that are more informal. If you're interested in the United Nations, learn more about the different kinds of agencies and what they do. If you're interested in the environment, look at the UN's Environment Program with its headquarters in Nairobi and the summer job opportunities that they have. If you're interested in refugee issues, it may be the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees that's right for you. There are dozens of UN agencies in many parts of the world that do lots of different kinds of work. And researching these different organizations should be your first step in deciding what's right for you. But once you've found the agency, you'll want to know the different ways of getting in, of starting to work with that UN agency. Many UN agencies have what's called a JPO, the Junior Professional Officer Program. Now, these are entry-level positions that are funded by your national government. So if you're a Canadian citizen, the government of Canada may be funding entry-level positions in a UN agency that you want to work with. Find out more about that. The United Nations also runs the UN Volunteer Program. That's based out of Bonn in Germany, and they have a very good website that will explain to you the different ways of starting with the UN as a volunteer. But there are many different ways to get involved with the UN through what are called deployment schemes, to get yourself on a registry, to be part of a pool of qualified candidates who can be deployed on short notice as an election monitor, as a protection officer, as a human rights worker. There's a lot of information online about where to start researching these opportunities. It's important that you know the terms. Now, on top of NGOs and international organizations, there are lots of different ways of getting involved with the private sector. With the rise of corporate social responsibility, many large international corporations, multinational corporations, have community programs that they run in many different parts of the world to work with local communities where they have projects ongoing. So if you're interested in development, human rights, gender issues, you may want to look into corporate social responsibility. The last 2 points that I'll make, the first is a point that I've made before. How international do you want to go? It may be that you have a real passion for sustainable development in Africa or gender issues in South Asia. but for different reasons you're not able, or you don't want, or you don't feel it's the right thing for you to go and work in the field, to be based in Nairobi or in a refugee camp, or to be working in Dhaka or in a remote area, let's say in Uttar Pradesh in India or what have you. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on these international issues in our very own backyard. Working with organizations that are based in Ottawa, based in Canada, that do fundraising work, that do advocacy work, that do policy work. Any international issue that you can think of, there will be an organization here in Canada that works on that issue that might need your help. It's also important to think about work that we can be doing here in Canada to make a contribution to these international issues. So for example, in the area where I work on refugees, in the Ottawa area alone, there are more than 7 organizations that work with newcomers to Ottawa to help them arrive and settle, find housing, get their children into school, to learn how the bus system works, how to do your groceries, how to open a bank account. These kinds of organizations can use your help. So think creatively about how you can engage in an international issue, both at home and abroad. But also think about how you can find the hidden opportunities. A bit of a truism that I'll tell you about is that only about 1/3 of all positions in this area are formally advertised. Many of the international positions that I have had were not posted online. There are opportunities that you can find out about through networking, through getting in touch with people who work in these organizations. But also, you can make your own luck. There are ways that you can help create the opportunity that's right for you. That's the message I want you to take away from this presentation. You can make your own luck. How do you do that? Let me give credit where credit is due, and here I want to show you a couple of books. This first book, The Canadian Guide to Working and Living Overseas, this is the book that I used when I was an undergraduate student in the early 1990s, deciding how I was going to start my career. But since the early 1990s, this book has become the big guide to living and working overseas. Now, if I just tilt this book up, you can see how thick it is and how full it is of information on things like writing your CVs, preparing covering letters. So I want to give credit to this book, The Big Guide to Working and Living Overseas, because it's a book that I have used for the past 18 years in deciding how I'm going to find ways of advancing my own international career. And here's the good news. If you are a Carleton student, you can access this book for free. And this is how you do it. All you need is your Carleton email address. And again, remember these steps are included in the PowerPoint slide, which is as a PDF file on the website of the Department of Political Science. All you need is your Carleton email address. If you go on to the International Student Services Office here at Carleton University, www.carleton.ca/ISSO. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see an option, International Opportunities for Carleton University Students. Click on that, click on Other International Opportunities, and then follow the links to the Big Guide. It is a fantastic resource. It has very useful chapters on how to write a CV, how to write a covering letter. It has updated databases of jobs, internships, volunteer, study abroad opportunities. And it has very useful planning tools. In this presentation, I won't be able to get into covering letters and CVs and how to actually do your job search. But I commend to you the information that's in that book. In the Big Guide, the author lays out what he understands to be the characteristics of a successful overseas worker. And he divides these into general traits, adaptation traits, intercultural communication traits, and overseas work effectiveness traits. Now have a look at this list that's posted on the screen. So in approaching a potential employer, you're going to want to be able to communicate that you enjoy change, that you have a sense of adventure, that you're open-minded, and that you're very patient. But also that you're able to adapt to different situations, that you have humor, you have understanding of culture shock, you've been through this kind of experience before, that you have very good communication skills, especially communicating in a cross-cultural or an intercultural context, and that you have those traits that make you effective working overseas. Now, one of the ways of making yourself successful for an international career is to develop skills that demonstrate that you have these kinds of traits. And you won't always acquire these skills and these experiences through work opportunities. For example, your overseas work effectiveness traits, you may be able to demonstrate your resourcefulness by saying, I backpacked across India. I was able to understand the travel schedule and get myself from point A to point B. Your intercultural communication skills may be developed by working in Ottawa with a recently arrived family and helping them with their English language skills, at the same time demonstrating your ability to work in a cross-cultural environment. I want you to be aware of these characteristics of an international worker, and now we're going to start thinking about how you develop them, how you develop these skills. The author of the Big Guide talks about your international IQ, about how you develop competencies in knowledge in different aspects of what it means to work internationally. Now, read this chapter of the Big Guide because it's especially useful, but I'm going to use a slightly different metaphor. I'm going to use the metaphor of your international toolkit. I want you to think of the challenge ahead of you in the coming years to develop your international toolkit. Think of yourself like a carpenter or a plumber. A carpenter or a plumber, in her toolkit, she'll have many different tools. A carpenter will have different saws and hammers and screwdrivers and levels and all kinds of different things. Now, a carpenter doesn't use every tool that she has when she goes to every job. She develops her ability to use these tools and takes her toolkit with her so that when she starts a new job, she's able to open it up and says, well, I'm building a deck, so I need these tools. Or I'm refurbishing someone's living room, so I need a different set of tools. In the same way, your challenge is to develop your international toolkit so that you're developing the skills and the experiences and the abilities during your time at Carleton, so that when you graduate and you go looking for that international job, you have the abilities, you have the experiences to demonstrate that you can do those things that you're asked to do. So what's in your toolkit? Your education is probably the most important tool in your toolkit. Your undergraduate degree, any specialization that you have in that degree, and increasingly in the international job market, a graduate degree is very important. But it's not only what you study, but think about where you study. As I'll say in a moment, Carleton has exchange agreements with more than 30 different universities around the world. If you're interested in development issues in Africa, imagine what it looks like to a potential employer if you say, I studied global politics, or I studied political science with a focus on development at Carleton University, and I spent a semester studying at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, or I spent a semester studying in Ghana. It shows that you've not only developed that ability to study and do well, but that you're able to do that in multiple environments. Now, yes, studying abroad is expensive, and it's something that we'll talk about in a moment. But education is also a way to build your network through the papers that you write, through the research that you do. If you're doing a fourth-year paper, or if you're doing an honors research essay, and you're doing work on refugee issues, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has an office here in Ottawa. You can contact the office and go in and talk to them about the research that you're doing. And through that research, develop networks, make contacts with people who may then be able to help you as you start your international career. So education is a very important part of your toolkit. But so is your work experience. Your work experience, not only internationally, if you have the opportunity to work abroad, that's obviously a great way to contribute to your international career, but experience working here in Ottawa. There are ways that domestic work experience can be relevant to an international career. Developing languages, always useful. Not only developing Canada's two official languages of English and French, but developing languages that will help you work in other parts of the world. Developing Arabic or Spanish or Swahili or Hindi or Urdu. All of these different languages, think about where it is that you may want to work. Is there a way of developing your abilities in that language? Now, skills and travel experience are two where they may say, you know, we're looking for someone, let's say you apply to Oxfam. Oxfam does a lot of work with water and sanitation in refugee camps. And they may say, we're looking for someone to dig pit latrines and manage the digging of pit latrines. Have you ever dug a pit latrine? I've never dug a pit latrine, but I was a tour guide. I had a job when I was a Carleton University undergraduate that I worked as a tour guide at Parliament Hill, and I was really good at taking unruly groups of people, getting them organized, moving them through Parliament. I have other ways of showing you my resourcefulness and my ability to adapt to new situations, my ability to lead, and my ability to manage. Travel experience. A number of students have said to me, this summer I'm backpacking across Europe, or I'm going to travel to India. Now this may, and the concern is this a waste of time? Is this going to look bad on my CV? In an interview, if someone says, give us an example of when you've been resourceful, or give us an example of your problem-solving skills, to be able to tell a story of figuring out how to buy that last ticket on the Shatabdi, on the overnight express train from New Delhi to Mumbai. Are there experiences in your travel which demonstrate your resourcefulness, that demonstrate your problem-solving skills? You have to be creative. Why? You have to be creative because so few jobs are advertised. You have to be entrepreneurial. As I said before, you have to make your own luck. There is this catch-22 when it comes to international work experience or international careers. Often it will say in a job poster, a requirement for applying for this job is a human rights monitor with the United Nations. We need 5 years of work experience. Here's the catch-22. You need that job to get your 5 years of experience, but you need the 5 years of experience to get the job. So how can you be creative? How can you be entrepreneurial? How can you overcome that catch-22? How can you make your own luck? I want you to think about where you want to be, not when you graduate, not on that wonderful day when you walk across the stage in Fieldhouse and get your degree. I want you to think about where you're going to be 5 years after you graduate at Carleton. What is it that you want to be doing? What kind of job do you want to be competitive in trying to secure? What kind of work do you want to be doing? Where do you want to be working? Imagine where you want to be 5 years after graduation, and then work backwards from there. Go out and look at job ads that are out there right now that sound like the kind of work that you may want to be doing. What do they list as their requirements? What kind of languages do you have to speak? What kind of skills do you need to be able to demonstrate? What kind of experience are they looking for? Once you know what you will eventually have to be demonstrating, you can then develop a plan on what you're going to be doing while you're here at Carleton to start that process. Don't wait until you're in your 4th year. If you can start in your 1st year, if you can start in your 2nd year, you can take advantage of the opportunities that you have here at Carleton. Because there are so many ways that students here at Carleton can be actively engaged in being entrepreneurial, can be actively engaged in building their toolkit. There are opportunities that you have as a student at Carleton that many other people don't have. I'm going to quickly run through these: studying abroad, working in Ottawa, internships, volunteering, summer work, and independent work and travel. It's important to understand that Carleton as an institution, Carleton as a university, wants to support you in this work. If you look at Carleton's strategic plan, a document called Defining Dreams, there are many references in there to the priorities of global identities, community engagement. Carleton's academic plan, which is posted on the website of the provost of this university, talks about enriching the student experience. There are different ways of trying to engage students, to recognize the work that students like you are doing to improve the quality of your education both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Carleton launched something called a co-curricular record. There are certain kinds of activities that are recognized here at Carleton as being important to your development as a student, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom as well. So look at that. But the main thing is to start as soon as you can. Take advantage of the experience of being here. Go and speak to your undergraduate program administrator. Are there special programs in your department? Internship opportunities? Are there ways that you can get academic credit for doing work outside of the classroom, doing an internship, doing volunteer work? Are there study abroad opportunities through your program? No degree will guarantee you a job. Getting a law degree, you still need to go and do your articling. You still need to get that experience. Getting a medical degree, you still need to go and do your residency before you're qualified to work. The work that you do in the classroom, the studying that you do in the library, doing well in your courses, that is a fundamental foundation for starting your international career. But there's so much more that you can do to take advantage of the resources and the opportunities that are here at Carleton. Let me start with studying abroad. One of the ways of linking your studies to what you eventually want to do is to look into the opportunity to study abroad. Most students do this in their third year. As I mentioned, Carleton has link agreements with more than 30 universities in all parts of the world. If you go to there's the website on the screen there. Again, it's in the handout that's as a PDF on the website of the Department of Political Science. If you go to the website of the International Student Services Office, you'll find the brochure with a list of all the different universities and programs where we have exchange opportunities. Now note that the deadline for applying is normally in early December. So you want to start looking into this in the fall term, normally of your second year. Think about the opportunities that are there. Look for funding opportunities that will make it easier for you to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. Now, I've also listed some programs, some study abroad programs that are specific to the Department of Political Science. The North American Mobility Program, the Canada-European Community Program for Cooperation in Higher Education and Training. So your own department may have special programs that can also give you opportunities to study abroad. And if you invest the time and the resources to study abroad, think about linking your study experience with a work experience or a volunteer experience. I had a student not that long ago that went as an exchange student to the University of Dar es Salaam. And he said to me, while I'm in Tanzania, while I'm in Dar es Salaam, is there a way that I can make the most out of the opportunity of being here? We were able to arrange for him to do an internship with a diplomatic mission in Dar es Salaam. So he had study experience of being in Tanzania, being at the University of Dar es Salaam, but he also developed work experience while he was there that was tangible, that was real, that went on his CV. So think creatively on how you can get the most out of all of the opportunities that are available to you. But there are many advantages of physically being a student in Ottawa that are not available to many students at other universities. This is what we call the capital advantage. The fact that you're physically studying in Ottawa, especially if you aren't originally from Ottawa, means that you have opportunities that are very exciting and that are very strategically useful. There are more than 900 potential employers here in Ottawa that can help you gain experience to launch your international career. members of parliament, senators, government departments and agencies, NGOs, embassies, high commissions, lobby groups. The list goes on and on and on. And there are ways that you can, very formal programs where you can link into these work opportunities. There's the Federal Student Work Exchange Program, which is with the Canadian federal government, where students have the opportunity to work with a government department or agency, and they get paid while they're doing that work. The website is there on the screen. There's also the opportunity for cooperative education while you're here at Carleton. I'm not an expert in co-op and the co-op program, but there is a website for the program here at Carleton. But in addition to these formal programs, don't forget what I told you about making your own luck, about creating your own opportunity. Any of these potential employers may be open to you sending them an email, sending them a cover letter, send them a CV, and say, hi, I'm a Carleton student. Would you be interested in having me come to work for you or volunteer for you or do an internship for you 1 day a week? Are you looking for a summer student for a summer job? Many of the large NGOs here in Ottawa, they hire students for summer positions, for paid summer work. But the opportunity that you have as a Carleton student is if you can give over a day a week or a half day a week to gain experience over time, to work in the office of your member of parliament. The experience that you can generate out of that time is extraordinary. But at the same time, there are opportunities for what we call internships. Now, an internship is a funny beast. It's not quite a volunteer position, and it's not quite a paid job. The idea of an internship is that you give over free labor in return for getting very concrete and very applied work experience. Normally with a position title. Normally with very specific responsibilities within your work to develop, launch, or manage a program. Internships are one of the best ways of overcoming this catch-22 of needing the experience to get the job, but needing the job to get the experience. A good internship can help you break that catch-22. There are lots of different kinds of internship opportunities that are out there. There's a fantastic list of internship opportunities in the big guide to working and living overseas. So don't forget to go onto the website of the International Student Services Office and register for free access to the big guide. Go into their database of internship opportunities and see if there's something there that's right for you. But again, there are formal programs and there are more informal programs. Using your networks through your professors, through colleagues, through work that you may have done, through doing research online, you may find internship opportunities that are right for you, that help you launch your international career. Now, finding the right program depends on what you want to get out of it. Do you want international experience? If so, going overseas obviously is a way to get that international experience, and you may be willing to incur more costs to have that benefit. But don't be afraid to negotiate some form of remuneration. If you're traveling overseas, can the organization help cover some of your costs? Again, the big guide has a tremendous list of internship opportunities, but here are 4 others that may be useful for you to know about. The Youth International Internship Program that's run through Canada's International Development Agency, the various internship opportunities through World University Services Canada, especially 2 programs, one called Students Without Borders, the other called Unitera. There's also a program through CETA. Before I move on from the Youth International Internship Program, there's a program called Students for Development, which is a program that we run here at Carleton as well, that provides opportunities for you to undertake an internship for 3 months. You have to be linked to academic credit, but there is some funding available to you. So go onto the Carleton website and do a search for Students for Development. There's also the Aga Khan Foundation of Canada that has a very well-established fellowship or internship program, and UN agencies that have a number of internship opportunities as well. There's one website that I list there from Campus Access that has many potential opportunities. but I have no control over the information on the campus access website. In fact, any of the external websites. So please use your caution and discretion as you use these external posts. But do have a look at the big guide. Now, if you find an opportunity, is it a good opportunity? Here's a list of questions that I want you to ask before you agree to get on that airplane and go and do an internship in Burkina Faso, or in Tanzania, or in Bangladesh, or in any other country, in any other part of the world. The first thing that you should ask is, how much is this going to cost? Are there any hidden costs? Is the organization charging you a fee for going to do this internship? Do you just cover your own costs? Understand how much it's going to cost and who pays for it. Make sure that you really understand the history, the background of this organization. How long have they been there? What work do they do? Have they had any problems with the local community? What kind of support will you have when you get there? Will you have a supervisor who monitors your work? Will you be met at the airport? Will they help you find housing? A way of finding out about the workings of an organization is to ask to see their financial statements. Do they have books that have been audited? Do they have an annual report that you can read? Are they transparent with their finances? And then once again is the question of security. Make sure that you understand where this organization works and what you will be doing. If there are any concerns about security, what is the UN security phase? Are there travel advisories from the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade for the area where you will be working? Ask good, critical, rigorous questions. Yes, be excited about being offered an internship opportunity, but don't just jump at the first opportunity that you're given. Be sure to ask questions along the way. Now, in addition to paid work and interning, you can get a lot of experience as a volunteer. Think of the kinds of volunteer positions that we have here in Ottawa, that we have here at Carleton, and the kinds of opportunities that you have to demonstrate leadership skills, the kinds of opportunities that you have to demonstrate management or fundraising experience, lobbying skills, the ability to keep books, to be a treasurer for a local group. There are lots of ways of getting very practical, very tangible skills and demonstrating that you have those skills that a future employer will want by volunteering while you are a student. Now, yes, you can volunteer internationally, but quality opportunities for volunteering you may find are few and far between. But there are many websites and a good section in the big guide that talks about volunteer opportunities abroad. But don't forget the range of groups that are active here on campus. Your local World University Services local committee that's involved in recruiting on sponsoring refugees to come to study at Carleton. The local chapter of Engineers Without Borders, the local chapter of UNICEF, the Oxfam group, the UNICEF group, all kinds of groups that are active here at Carleton doing fundraising, doing advocacy work, doing lobbying group, organizing programs. It's a wonderful way to gain experience. And so there you see a list to the Carleton University Students Association with a list of all the different clubs that are registered here on campus. But don't forget all of those organizations that are here in Ottawa. If you have a day a week, if you have a half day a week, can you volunteer your time? As I said before, there are a number of organizations that work with newcomers to Ottawa. If you're interested in working with refugees abroad, you can get experience with resettled refugees here in Canada. If you're interested in issues of social justice or children or the environment or urban issues, any of these organizations are issues that affect us here in Ottawa. So don't overlook or don't dismiss the benefits of gaining experience as a volunteer. It's good, it's a good experience, it helps you better understand these issues, but it also helps you think creatively about ways of overcoming that catch-22 and gaining those skills and the experiences that you'll need to start your international career. Now, the last few points that I want to make before I conclude this presentation is on some of the practicalities. In a lot of the presentation that I've been giving to you today, I've been saying it's wonderful to study abroad. It's wonderful to intern abroad. It's wonderful to travel abroad. I'll be the first to admit that this is not always a very inexpensive thing to do. There are times that you will find that gaining international experience to help advance your international career can cost money. If you think, for example, that I mentioned before the experience of interning with the UN's Environment Program. Let's say you're very interested in environmental issues, you're very interested in the United Nations. The UN Environment Program, with their headquarters in with their headquarters in Nairobi, they say, we would love you to come and be an intern here. We'll provide you with accommodation, we'll give you a stipend to support. All you need to do is get your way to Nairobi. Fantastic. A ticket to Nairobi can cost $1,200, sometimes more. How do you rationalize, how do you justify spending that kind of money? A point that I will make is that an interest in an international career is an investment. Think of the resources that you invest in your education here at Carleton. There are opportunities to enhance your education, to enhance your skills that may involve a financial commitment. As you're thinking about where you want to be 5 years after you graduate from Carleton, think about the kind of investment that you're willing and able to make to help advance that objective. Now, this is a difficult proposition. Already, university students, undergraduate students pay thousands of dollars for their education. And something that we're trying to do is to create more opportunities to help support students that want to gain international experience. There's the International Education Opportunity Scholarship, which is offered not every year, but most years. There are some funding opportunities through the International Student Services Office that's listed on their website. Your home department may have travel scholarships, may have bursaries. Your faculty may have bursaries, opportunities there. If you're a graduate student, the Graduate Students Association has travel grants and bursaries for you to go and do research, for you to attend conferences. The Big Guide to Working Overseas, Working and Living Overseas, it also has a listing of different funding opportunities. Doing research on ways of funding and supporting your international experience will help. And the sooner you start this research, the sooner you'll know about the kinds of opportunities to which you can apply. But also think about the way that you're able to invest your money. If you commit $50 a month to a tax-free savings account, in just 2 years, you'll have $1,200 to be able to use to buy that ticket to Nairobi. So if you're in your first year, if you're in your second year, is there a way that you can find just a little bit of money every month to put aside so that in your fourth year, once you graduate, that you have just a little pot of money, a little resource to help get you started? Tax-free savings accounts are very good because you don't pay taxes on the interest that you gain in your accounts. I'm not going to say that I have a simple answer on paying for international experiences. I recognize that it can be expensive. But just as I encourage you to be entrepreneurial in your approach to finding opportunities, be entrepreneurial in finding ways to pay for your experience. Think about fundraising. Think about events that you can hold to raise the funds that you need. Now, once you have gone through the study abroad, the interning, the volunteering, the work experience, once you've paid for the opportunity, once you come to that point where you're going to start applying for a job, I want you to apply those same research skills, those same entrepreneurial skills that you applied to developing your international experience. You need to apply those to the process of actually starting your job. And again, I can't say often enough, look at the Big Guide. Read the Big Guide to Living and Working Overseas and all of the resources that they have on how to structure your job search. Start with a self-evaluation. Start with a description of what it is that you have to offer. You've been working for years to develop your international profile, your international IQ. You've been developing your toolkit. What do you have to offer, and how do you target those skills and experiences to the kinds of jobs to which you want to apply? How do you write your CV? How do you write your cover letter? Where do you look for jobs? How do you react to those jobs that are posted online? But again, how can you be proactive? How can you be entrepreneurial? How can you make your own luck? Think about how you apply for the job and how you make your pitch. Again, I won't get into that in this presentation, but I can't say often enough, read the chapters in the big guide. So while you may have the perfect portfolio, you've developed your covering letter, you've prepared your CV, you have everything in order, and you've got that interview, be mindful of the fact that the process for an international career, process of an international job, can be very different depending on the opportunity. There are some positions that take 9 months to go through the recruitment. There are other positions where you may get a phone call and they'll say, can you be ready to travel in 72 hours? So it's very important, just as you've been meticulous, just as you've been organized in your approach to planning developing your international toolkit, just as you've been rigorous in your approach of keeping track of where you're applying, just as you've been rigorous in the job of maintaining your CVs and your cover letters and what you're telling to who and how you're applying, you have to keep track of these details as you're in the interview process, because you could get a phone call out of the blue and you need to be able to keep track of the position that they're talking about and be ready either for a telephone interview from Kenya and you're in Paris, or you may be called to an office in New York, or you may be called to an office down the street. So again, I can't say often enough, read the big guide, read the chapters on interviewing, read the chapters on how to manage your job search. The last thing I want to leave you with is a long list of places to start looking. Here's a list of lots of different websites that I know of that advertise international careers. Some of these websites specialize on more middle management or senior management positions, but some advertise entry-level positions that could be right for you. Now again, remember that the PDF of this presentation is posted on the website of the Department of Political Science, so don't worry about copying them all down now. Go and take advantage, download that presentation, and start looking online. And find your own websites. There may be hundreds of other websites out there that I'm unaware of that you may find. Keep track of the jobs that you're looking at. Spend time reading the qualifications that are required, not only of positions now, but positions that may be of interest to you 5 years, 10 years, 15, even 20 years down the line. But remember, only 30% of jobs out there in the international field are ever advertised. So this is the last thing I want to leave you with. What I have discussed today is just the beginning. The process of starting an international career, like any career, is a long process. You have opportunities every day to make investments in the prospect of a career down the road. There are things that you can be doing right now, next week, next month, next year, to develop the skills that you need to start your international career. There are things that you can be doing right here, right now at Carleton to develop your international toolkit. You can be entrepreneurial. Through study abroad, through work opportunities, through internships, through volunteering on campus in Ottawa, you can develop the skills and the experience that you need to start your international career. But remember, you can be entrepreneurial. You have to be entrepreneurial. Through hard work, through diligence, through organization, through creativity, and a little bit of courage, you can make your own luck. and you can start your international career. I wish you all the best. I wish you good luck, and I look forward to hearing about how you have started your international career. I'm James Milner from the Department of Political Science here at Carleton University. Thank you, and good luck.